Hi, this is Priscila. The topic is 1970s. My teammate is Haron, and this is the part two of the presentation. So we're going to start with an successful bit of the presidency. Although Nixon's attacks on alleged communists and political opponents alarmed some people, they increased his popularity among conservative Republicans. In 1952, General Dwight Eisenhower selected the 39 years old first-time senator to be his presidential running mate. A few months after accepting the nomination, Nixon became the target of a negative campaign that raised questions about money and gifts he allegedly received from industry lobbyists. Nixon answered these charges in his famous Checkers speech, claiming that the only gift he ever accepted was a puppy named Checkers that his young daughter gave it to him. The speech proved effectively preserved Nixon's spot on the ticket. Eisenhower and Nixon won the election of 1952 and were re-elected in 1956. In 1960s, Nixon claimed the Republican presidential nomination, but lost one of the closest elections in American history to U.S. Senator John F. Kennedy of Massachusetts. The turning point of the campaign came in the first ever nationally televised presidential debate. During the broadcast, Nixon appeared pale, nervous, and sweaty compared with his calm, well-rested, and vigorous opponent. The loss of Kennedy dealt a terrible blow to Nixon's ego. He claimed that the media disliked him, had slanted campaign coverage in favor of his handsome and wealthy opponent. Nixon returned home to California, where he practiced law and launched a campaign for governor in 1962. When he lost these elections as well, many observers believed that his political career was over. As a disgusted Nixon told reporters, "You won't have Nixon to kick around anymore." Winning the White House. 6 years after losing the governorship in his home state, Nixon made a remarkable political comeback and once again claimed his party's presidential nomination. He prevailed in the 1968 U.S. presidential election, defeating Democrat Hoover Humphrey and Tea Party candidate George Wallace. Nixon took office at a time of upheaval and change in the U.S. The American people were bitterly divided over the Vietnam War, while women marched for equal rights and racial violence rocked the nation's cities. Declaring his intentions to achieve peace with honor in Vietnam, Nixon introduced a strategy known as Vietnamization, which called for gradually withdrawing American troops from the war while training South Vietnamese army forces to take over their own defense. In January 1973, Nixon administration officials researched a peace agreement with Communist North Vietnam. The last American combat troops left Vietnam in March of that year. The hostilities continued, however, and in 1975, North Vietnam conquered South Vietnam and reunited the country under communist rule. In addition to dealing with the Vietnam War, Nixon made historic visits in 1972 to China and the Soviet Union. He reduced tensions between these communist nations and the U.S., helping to set the stage for establishing formal diplomatic relations. Nixon also signed important treaties to limit the production of nuclear weapons. The Watergate scandal. As his term in office wore on, President Nixon grew increasingly paranoid and defensive. Though he won re-election by a landslide in 1972, he resented any challenge to his authority and approved or attempts to discredit those who opposed him. In June 1972, police found 5 burglars from Nixon on committee to re-elect the president in the office in the Democratic National Committee, located in the Watergate office building. Soon they found that Nixon himself was involved in the crime. He had demanded that the Federal Bureau of Investigation stop investigating the break-in and told his aides to cover up the scandal. In April 1972, a congressional committee approved 3 articles of impeachment: obstruction of justice, misuse of federal agencies, and defending the authority of Congress. Before Congress could impeach him, however, President Nixon announced that he would resign Gerald Ford took over to his office, and to the disgust of many Americans, pardoned Nixon right away. The Watergate scandal and beyond. While Nixon was running to re-election in 1972, operatives associated with his campaign broke into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. Several members of Nixon's administration had knowledge of the burglary, and while Nixon denied any involvement, secret tapes of White House conversations later revealed that the president had participated in efforts to cover up the criminal activity. Facing impeachment by Congress, Nixon resigned from office on August 9, 1974. He was replaced by Vice President Gerald Ford, who a month later pardoned Nixon for any wrongdoing. A number of administration officials were eventually convicted of crimes related to the Watergate affair. After leaving the White House, Nixon returned to California and quietly worked to rehabilitate his image, writing books, traveling extensively, and consulting with Democratic and Republican presidents. By the time he died on April 22, 1994, at age 81 in New York City, after suffering a stroke, some people view him as a respected elder statesman. Other Americans, however, rejected efforts to paint him as anything but a disgraced criminal. The 1970s fashion. Models like Jane Birkin and Jerry Hall epitomize the 70s style. Bell-bottom pants, flowing maxi dresses, ponchos, and frayed jeans dominated the 1970s fashion. Tie-dye inspired by the 1960s hippies style continued to be worn while patchwork and plaid fabrics gained popularity. In 1974, Diane von Furstenberg debuted her famous robe dress, embodying the modern working women's desire for both comfort and style. The 1970s music. After Watergate, many people withdrew from politicals altogether. They turned instead to pop culture, easy to do in such a trend-laden, fad-happy decade. They listened to extract tapes of Jackson Browne, Olivia Newton-John, Donna Summers, and Marvin Gaye. Disco rose, and with it, the sounds of ABBA, the Bee Gees, and Donna Summers. On the rock front, bands like the Rolling Stones, Van Halen, Pink Floyd, and Queen dominated airwaves. Additionally, the 1970s saw a return to handicraft like latch hook rugs and macrame, while sports like racquetball and yoga gained popularity. Many people read I'm okay, you're okay, and the joy of sex, experimented with wife sweeping parties, and smoked pot. In general, by the end of the decade, many young people were using their hard-fought freedom to simply do as they please, to wear what they want, to grow their hair long, to have sex, to do drugs. The liberation, in other words, was intensely personal.